Around 1,000 years ago, the Viking Age became the last chapter in the history of a culture of which just about everything from the days of old was eventually eradicated, even from memory. Conquered by the Roman Catholics, as they asserted their fake enlightenment throughout the centuries with ditto tactics, leaving the ancient Norse culture systematically demonized, exterminated, and forgotten. Nowadays, the sparse remains of the Norse pagan heritage are taken care of by Viking museums, informing us that the Norse pagans were stupid, superstitious, vicious, and violent, aside from surprisingly nimble with handicrafts. As it turns out, however, our Norse forebears were no such thing as the savages they are too often portrayed to have been. They were rather part of an ancient and forgotten Norse civilization whose extensive influence spanned many millennia, and from which the stories of the voyages in both the Odyssey and the Argonautica can be shown, logically and inescapably, to originate, as can, interestingly enough, the biblical description of the rivers in the Garden of Eden. Today most scholars look upon the voyages of Odysseus and Jason as happening in a fictitious mindscape, mostly for the simple reason that their geographical descriptions don't quite fit the sea and landscape of the Mediterranean. However, those scholars may not have looked in the right places, because there is also another tradition, one which has claimed that Odysseus sailed further to the north and out in the Atlantic. Plutarch, for example, wrote that an isle Ogygian lies far out at sea, distant 5 days' sail from Britain, going westwards, and 3 others equally distant from it and from each other. Ogygia was where Odysseus stayed for 7 years with the goddess Calypso. Sailing westward from Britain, one would be caught by the Gulf Stream and might end up on the Faroe Islands, where Stora Dimmen can be seen to be of equal distance to the 3 surrounding islands Sandoy, Skuvøy and Litla Dimmen. This identification started Felice Vinci's investigation to locate the whole route of Odysseus' voyage. In 1879, Théophile Cayeux wrote that Troy was situated in East Anglia, between Cambridge and the Wash, where he discovered 2 huge war dikes, identified the river Cam with the Iliad's Scamander, and the river Great Ouse with Homer's Simois, and became convinced that Homeric Troy once was situated on the Gog-Magog hills outside of Cambridge in England. This was the starting point for Eman Jacob Wilkins' investigation of the route of Odysseus. Vinci and Wilkins both came up with a whole solution to the whereabouts of Odysseus, but their solutions did not overlap at any single point. After my initial success in 2006 of identifying the sun god's island of Thrinakia with Trenyken in Lofoten, I set out to compare Vinci and Wilkins' arguments to try to figure out who was right or wrong about what. In this work, also the research by Jürgen Spanuth turned out to be most helpful for me. He identified the sunken island of Atlantis with the island called Basileia, which used to exist close to Heligoland. This was helpful because Homer's description of the island of King Alcinous and Plato's description of the island of Atlantis makes it clear that they were writing about one and the same island, a once holy island, also known as Avalon, which sank beneath the waves. It was on this island, in the hall of King Alcinous, that Odysseus told of his adventures, and from there he was afterwards taken home to Ithaca by ship. I was convinced by Vinci's placing of the catalogue of ships in the Baltic, although I later discovered it to be more Nordic, and I bought Vinci's identification of Ithaca as Lyø in Denmark. But I also found Wilkins' reasons for identifying Troy near Cambridge far superior to Vinci's Troy in Finland. This changed the picture quite a bit, and put me on the trail of some major new discoveries, the first of which were Cape Malea and Lemnos. Cape Malea was where Odysseus was taken by a storm and blown off course to become lost at the beginning of the Odyssey. As he was now coming from Troy in England, and had to go around the tip of North Jutland called Grenen in order to get home to Ithaca, Grenen became the obvious location of Cape Malea. And since Cape Malea in Greece is the tip of Peloponnese, North Jutland became its northern counterpart. Eventually this led to the realization that all places from the beginning of the catalogue of ships to and including Crete were to be located by turning Greece 180 degrees around and looking at its northern reflection in and around Denmark. Long after I had identified Lemnos, this finally led to the discovery of Aulis on the Danish west coast. Aulis was by the bay where all the Achaean ships gathered before going via Lemnos to Troy. I had previously located Lemnos by looking for it between the Baltic and England. And since Lemnos was where the fire god Hephaestus had his bronze smithy, my eyes fell upon Heligoland, where I knew they were mining copper back in the Bronze Age, or even earlier. This identification later turned out to be explicitly confirmed by an ancient text. It was described by the pioneering geographer Pytheas of Massilia, who around 350 BC was the first one we know of to have included astronomy and mathematics into geography. Pytheas travelled from Marseille to Basileia, and from that now sunken island he described the neighbouring island as having cliffs of various kinds, obviously the black, white and red cliffs of Heligoland close by, upon which he reported that Hephaestus had his smithy. This was, of course, a major breakthrough in this research. The fact then that Lemnos really was Heligoland confirmed that the Achaeans actually came from the Nordic area and that Troy must have been in England. What is more, because the only connection between the geography of the Iliad and that of the Odyssey goes via Styx and rivers connecting the end of the catalogue of ships at the top of today's Bay of Bothnia with Hades and the Okeanos in the Norwegian Sea, this also proves by necessity that Odysseus journeyed up the Norwegian coast when he got lost in the storm. This special feature of a connection between the Iliad's catalogue of ships and the Odyssey via Styx and some of its rivers is of course described by Homer, but it does not exist at all in the Mediterranean. Vinci first identified such a connection, but he located Hades by the White Sea in Russia. However, when I researched the route of Jason and the Argonauts in this northern region, I discovered that the river Acheron, which connected via Styx, Titaresius and Peneus to today's Bay of Bothnia on the other side, actually had to be the Alta River in northern Norway, something which clearly also identified Styx, Titaresius and Peneus. Cross-referencing the geography of Homer with that of Apollonius of Rhodes thus turned out to clarify things both ways. Something which also led to whole new discoveries and eventually gave a clear picture of pretty much exactly where both Odysseus and Jason went. Solutions which leaves no doubt about the fact that the world of Odysseus and Jason was an ancient culture way north in the world, but which today is long since forgotten. A civilization which, through this, is proven not only to have existed, but also to have navigated the globe and mapped it, to have had advanced knowledge of astronomy, and to have influenced not only ancient Greece but also ancient Egypt, as well as Genesis, through the perhaps surprising but equally inescapable final locating of the 4 rivers of Eden. all of which could imply some interesting corrections to several currently held historical conceptions, particularly for those who hold them. One of them perhaps being the Darwinian view that the ancients understood less than we do today. Take the Okeanos as an example. In this 19th century rendering of the geographical understanding of Homer, we see the Okeanos around the rim of a very limited understanding of world geography. But it was not the ancients' geography which was limited, it was, and is, the Darwinian understanding of it. Okeanos was the ancient name for the Gulf Stream, and this visually identifiable ocean river is connected to a global oceanic conveyor belt running through both the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. So when Okeanos, the ocean river, was said to encircle the Earth, that was and is actually literally true. The modern misconception of the meager state of ancient geography seems to stem from a lack of connection between Apollonius of Rhodes and Eratosthenes, his successor as head librarian in Alexandria. Unlike Apollonius, Eratosthenes was no fan of Homeric geography. He accused Homer of drawing all his stories from his imagination and, interestingly enough, of placing in southern lands places and situations which could only be found in the extreme north. Eratosthenes was apparently not initiated into the fact that it was in the extreme north much of the Odyssey was happening. His logical reasoning also made him comment on Homer's description of an upward flowing stream at the mouth of the river Eridanus as clear evidence that the poet was a liar, since, as he said, a river flowing backwards is quite impossible anywhere in the world. What Homer and Apollonius knew, and Eratosthenes obviously didn't, was that in the Atlantic Ocean the tidal waves make the rivers flow upstream at their mouths twice every single day. Today, Eratosthenes is considered the father of modern geography, and whatever the reason for the lack of communication between Apollonius and Eratosthenes, it must have been the same reason as why Apollonius had to include his knowledge of northern geography in his Argonautica story covertly. He did this by magically and unnoticeably transporting Jason and the Argonauts from the clashing rocks as Bosporus by the Black Sea to the clashing rocks as the Napp stream in Lofoten, Norway. After passing the clashing rocks, Jason was supposedly sailing eastward from Bosporus along the southern coast of the Black Sea. But Apollonius' description is actually that of sailing north and eastward from Lofoten along the northern coast of Norway all the way into Russia. Now that these places have been identified, the ancient descriptions could be of great interest to local historians in this whole area, adding a dimension to their history which they never had before. And if you think about it, if the currently held view is the correct one, and the world of Odysseus and Jason is just an ancient fairyland, born of a limited geographical understanding, what chance would there be then of finding a real geographical area randomly answering directly to the descriptions of this fairyland? Considering its complexity, it should be obvious to anyone that the rules of probability would dictate that chance to be none whatsoever. Then, on the other hand, how complex and direct would this answering have to be in order for it in itself to constitute proof that Homer and Apollonius actually described the geography of Northern Europe? It should be equally obvious that a logical and consistently working explanation of where they all went, backed up by the mentioned inner logic, the weather, the light, the clothes, and a list of some 200 identified places, does not come about by chance. What it does is to constitute a clear indication, if not a valid proof, that both Odysseus and Jason sailed in the north of Europe. Now, as this must in fact be so, it has many interesting implications. One of which is the solution to an old riddle from Genesis in the Bible, namely the question about the whereabouts of the 4 rivers in the Garden of Eden. In the Old Testament, this story was from when the Jews were in Egypt, and we find River Egypt in this northern geography identified as Glomma, the longest river in Norway. Just like the Nile, this river Egypt comes from the direction of Ethiopia, identified as Lapland today. In this area we found not only Assyria, but also the Homeric entrance to Hades, as well as 2 of the rivers from Styx. There are 4 rivers coming from Styx, however, 2 of which passes by Assyria, one where there's good quality gold, and one that goes through the land of Ethiopia, all just like it says in Genesis. All of which makes biblical Eden and the Elysian plain of the ancient Greeks one and the same place, revealing that the concept of the original Christian paradise must have been more than a little inspired by the ancient Norse paradise, as was the Greek mythological land of the blessed dead. Something perhaps also hinted at in the Bible by the fact that life and death are described both just before and immediately after the descriptions of the rivers of Eden. This is also where we find the mentioning of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, which, when placed in the high north, give direct and inescapable associations to the Norse tree of Yggdrasil, as well as to Atlas, Heracles, and the polar axis. So this discovery of the lost civilization of the North should necessitate some serious rethinking of several currently held academic and religious notions about our past. That should also inspire a new look at the late storyteller Eobuk's saga, since the ancient Norse world he told about is shown to be the very same as the lost civilization we now can safely consider proven to once actually having existed. And it so happens that the whole chronology as delineated in the book Saga starts with paradise, as does Eobuk in this recording I made of him in 2005, with an intro from 2000.
In our Ars mythology, we divide in period, so we talk about the paradise time, the ice time, and after ice time. Paradis et is in English paradise. And in paradise time we had 5 et, pirouette, roos et, jarl et, karlet, and trelet. The children from the swan was the pirouette. The children from the Disa was the roset, and the children from the landshövding was the jarlet, and the children of jarl become the karet, and the kar children become the trelet. So we had pirouette, roset, jarlet, karlet in the paradis et. The swan was the most beauty and healthy woman what existed on this ball at that time, and when she, Svan, the swan, is flying into Odenma, she becomes the mother figure in the mythology. The swan, she gets pregnant by Solbocken Balders sperma. Solbocken Balder's sperma, so Solbocken Balder is making his swan pregnant, and she gets birth to 7 daughters and 12 boys. The first son become Ers, and the first daughter become Maj, and the 12th son become solbocken Balder, the man who had the sperma in the story and make her, his swan, pregnant. The boys between the first and the 12, we call them ballbockar. And the ballbockar are 10, so there are 12 brothers together, means månbocken, and 10 ballbockar and solbocken. The 10 ballbockar are divided again that the second oldest son is ballbock sek, rätt, ra, re, ballbock sekreterare, and after we have 8 sup, le, an, de, suppleantbockar, and the 12th one, the second youngest one is the ballbock kassör, and the kassör is giving the sör vis to solbocken. So solbocken, he is getting his protein and his vitamin from his brothers, the father and the 12 diare. Now when solbocken Balder and solfågeln Svanens 12th son become 27, we get one new solbock in the story. And in same second, the old solbocken Balder and solfågeln Svanen become gubbe and gumma. Ballgubben Per and ballgumman Ella. So Per and Ella has been before in their life being solbocken Balder and solfågeln Svanen. But solbocken Balder is not only making children with his swan, he make also children with the disa. And the disa can be many disa. So of course to be solbocken Balder in the paradise time, it was full of job. And from the disa's children, it become either one boy or one girl. If the boy become one breeder in the future, means that he is one ball-landsboy, he can be landshövding in one ringland somewhere on the planet. This landshövding is Aser, because his mom is Disa and his father is solbocken Balder. The landshövding has also his sister and his brother with him in that ringland, and the brother is called Lensherre and the sister called Lensfru. And Lensherre is one ballklubba man and Lensfru is one mö, or she is one jungfru, what means that the sister doesn't make children and the brother doesn't make children, it's only the landshövding with the lands who make the children. This landshövding, he make the jarl girl pregnant in the ringland, and the jarl girl get out small boys, and that become the jarl ett. And this jarl ett boys, the big and strong landsboys from the jarls, they are making the car girl pregnant, and the car girl is getting out boys and girls. And this car boy, who is one landsboy, he is making children with a trail. So the trail boys and girls are the children of the car. The trail boy had no right to make children, so only the trail girls become mother, so that means that the trail man, he only was one uppoffer man, he only could offer up for the coming child, but he could not make children by himself. So all the trails in the paradise time could say, my father is one car. Every car could say, my father is one jarl, and every jarl could say, my father is landshövding, and every landshövding could say, my father is Solbocken Balder, who when his son again, Solbocken Balder's 12th son, become 27, become Gubbe. So Gubbe Gumma is one father and one mother in the story, but Gubbe Gumma is also the grandfather and the grandmother in the story. Disa, she becomes stammother, and the landshövding becomes stamfather. So we talk about stamfather and stammother and anfather and anmother in the paradise time. That means we was one big family from the raw material sperma, and our highest godness at that time was Balgubben Per and Balgumman Ella, and in that way they are the highest godness in the paradise time, and they are himmels gode and himmels gudinna. The himmels gode and himmels gudinna is representing the arch of the sky, where we can see all the stars, who is represented like skär norr, we call, with the word norr inside. But not only skär norr, we have also solen and månen, and solskivan and månskivan. So this Per and Ella representing the universum, the sky with the stars, the sun and the moon. Gubbe and Gummas oldest son Ers and oldest daughter Maj is representing the moon. So they are mån gode and mån gudinna. The mån gode Ers and the mån gudinna Maj is also kärleksgode and kärleksgudinna. That means that Ers is one kärleksgode and Maj is one kärleksgudinna, but both of them are mån gode and mån gudinna. Again, Gubbe and Gummas 12th son is representing the sun. So Sol is the sun, and Solbocken Balder representing the sun. But also the inflying swan is one sol gudinna, when the Solbocken Balder is one sol gode. But they are not only sol gode and sol gudinna, they are also fruktbarhetsgode and fruktbarhetsgudinna. That means that Solbocken Balder is one fruktbarhetsgode and Solfågeln Svanen is one fruktbarhetsgudinna. Månbocken Balder Ers är alltså då en kärleksgode, och hans syster Maj, drottningen, hon är alltså en kärleksgudinna. Medan föräldrarna himmelsgudinnan, himmelsguden är också is also Oskegubben Per. And Oskegubben Per is rolling his stones there in the sky, and when two stones go together it becomes one vig, one oskvig. And the oskvig is one blixt in rot, one salama in van, and I think the lightning of the thunder in English. So Per is Oskegubben Per, and his Ella. So Per and Ella is himmelsgode and himmelsgudinna, but also the thunderstorm and the thunder clouds. All this has to do with the himmel and the himmelsgode, himmelsgudinna. Ers and Maj has to do with the storm and the wind, because Ers in Invan, Seppo ilma, and ilma means like air or wind. It can be good ilma today or bad ilma today. If it's bad ilma, maybe raining and very much storm, but good ilma means sunshine and blue sky. So now these ears and mai are in one language, Seppo ilma rinen, and mai is in one language, Maja ilma tar, and ilma had to do also everything is up in the ilma. One ball long example with gas inside, it's one flying ball long, one ballong in the ilma. It's up there in the ilma. So actually we can see the sun in the ilma, we can see the moon in the ilma, and we see all the stars are actually there when we look up in through the ilma. Paradise Time is one long story of gudar and gudinnor, asagudar, asagudinnor. So the female is gudinna and the masculine is gude. And all children who are asar, that means the children from the swan are asar, and the children from the disa are asar, so they are asa gudar when they are born from the swan, asa gude, asa gudinna, but if they are born from the disa, they are asar and asynjor. So actually only the children who are born from the swan become gudar and gudinnor. Paradis 1 it's one period on this history of the planet. But every period has one end, and the end of the period was 50,010,021 years back. That means that the axis of the Earth was shifting, and in the same time the North Pole get one new situation. So we get one new North Pole and one new South Pole, and we have one old South Pole and one old North Pole. The North Pole we call Norr, and in Norr is one island, and this island is the most holy island in this story, and it's called Odens Ö, the Ö of Oden. Oden is actually the sun Shiva, the Shiva of the sun, and Shiva always been and Shiva will always be, and the sun Shiva is represented by Balgubben Per and Balgumman Ella. Balgubben Per is that man who is the allfather from all sperma, and his sperma come out from one god. That means that the breeder had one god. The breeder has balans, means the form of his decoration, and this decoration can also be balklubba or balans. But the breeder has one balans, and the balance is the god. And from the god comes the sperm, so actually we are all children of God. But the first Ragnarök in the story is when the Asar become touched by the nature who disseminated them to only few from to be many before. And also this shift of the axle make that in 3 months' time the north part of the ball become covered by ice. And the ice comes from up, down, from the fruct what had been existing in the air, in the ilma. And even the water become deep freezed down into the bottom, and the whole North Calotte become one ice calotte. But in all nature phenomena, we had one stream of hot water, who we call the Gulf Stream, and the Gulf Stream is streaming in to the ringland Udenma, the situated of the North Pole before, but now Udenma become the old North Pole, when the new North Pole is covered by ice. What we know today, there is no land to live on the North Pole, but the old North Pole is hell, and here still is living people in this ringland called Udenma. When this happened, these Aser people become isolated. They come isolerad from all this rest of the Van people who was living outside of Udenma before. So when this happened, we get 10 different art of people. Then in Paradise time was only one art. We become now tropical arts, and all the 10 tropical arts become kings. That means that they are representing sun and moon, and the king is fucking, when the Finnish king is only one king. They had one other fucker called Solbakken Balder. So now in the Outlandish period, we call it where Outland is, everything is east. Anyway, the Gulf streams who come into the Baltic Gulf could make that the people could continue to live here in the story 50 million years. And that time we get one more called white art. And outside of the white art, we have the yellow art, who become the Peking people. We had the brown art, who come from Narkas, Sur. And we have also the blue people living what we call Africa. And we had the red art, who's the red Indian art. So we can divide ourselves in different colors, who are all created under the Outlandish period. Under the Outlandish period, it became one change. We created on the planet the 4 seed, and the 4 seed we call in root for vete, råg, korn, and havre. So now the oat, barley, rye, and wheat are created in the Outlandish period, who means that we now could grow these 4 seed, and we could get white bread, we could get brown bread, we could get beer, and we could get morning porridge every morning from this oat. And from there starts something we called agriculture, because in that period you had to grow your food. It was not anymore coming from the air or from the sperm or the sap or other natural protein and vitamin. And also in the Outlandish period we get the domestic animal, we get the cow, what is arctical, we get the pig, what is arctical, and we get the chicken, what is arctical, and we get the arctical sheep and the arctical goat, and also one arctical horse. Horse had been existing already in Paradise time, but anyway we make one who was arctical, who could be here even when it's 40 degrees cold around. In the end, the cow, the pig, and the chicken, the lamb, the goat, and the horse could also exist on this level of coldness and freezing, what the period anyway consisted of. In the Outlandish time, we still are all living on the islands, but our domestic animal could feel good to be on the fastland together with mammoth and other of these animal what we had. we had also the fox, the elk, the bear, and all the other Arctical creation. But of course in Atlantis the waterway out is closed, so we are living on the inside here. But 10,021 years ago they was feeling and getting some kind of knowledge that the ice had been eaten in the Norway coast up to the north of Norway, and also from the Baltic Gulf, the lake called Ladoga and Onega up to the White Sea, become like one separate island in the top, and down from this island we could go down to later on to Mediterranean example. So now in the end of Atlantis period the water is not only circulating inside in Udenma, it has been getting larger, so one day even the water was going through, it didn't turn back anymore, it went to the White Sea, and there it opened one completely new road of hot water. This new route of hot water made that it started to eat on this Norway coast, so in the end when the White Sea and the Norway coast had been opening, so 10,021 years ago, we have what we call the second Ragnarök, when kilometers of ice started to move in the direction of east and make all the rivers, all the lakes, all these things what we have today, and all stones become round. So we get for first time really the round stone. So still today you can go to Estonia, example, where it's full of round stone, and all these stones are really getting the form 10,021 years back. But before this catastrophe was happening, we had a gubben called Noah. And gubben Noah, he was one hedersman, and we still have a song about him, Gubben Noah var en hedersman. När han skulle dricka sperm fick han sådan hicka. Gubben Noah var en hedersman. And this Gubben Noah, he put on boats all these Arctical world with plants, seed, and this animal of cow, pig, chicken, Arctical goat, sheep, and horse. And they're arriving to one island called Bockland, and they become one Noah Tun, the place where Noah was arriving, and there was big caves called Necrus caves, and there into these caves they went with all this Arctical world, and in 3 months they stayed inside there, because under these 3 months all this ice is rolling over. But Gotland, Bockland, Gotland is situated outside of the Swedish coast today. We can see it still on the map, and this was one chalk island who had been made from shells by thousands of years, also because the Gulf Stream was in the time going out that way over what we call Östgötaland and Västgötaland today, to the fjord of Norway, and that way outside of Norway we have the islands outside of Norway, what we call England, Scotland and Irish today. And now the Atlantis period is over, and we come to the next period where Gubben Noah and his culture become spread all over the planet.
The latter should be just about where the book saga meets, if not history, at least prehistory, and which could explain why most ancient mythologies from all around the world start with a story about paradise. It could perhaps also elucidate the legends of ancient white gods in the Americas, like Quetzalcoatl and Viracocha, about whom it has often been asserted that they originally came from the lost civilization of Atlantis. From what we now know, we can see that they may or may not have come from that particular island which sank. Most likely, however, They came from within the lost civilization, which is now finally identified as having been centered in the north of Europe. In its time, this land was called Asgard, the land of the Aser. And it makes me sad to think about what happened to the American Indians when the white gods had returned as predicted, except they were no longer gods but devils. What had happened since the visit by the gods? The ancient Norse world had been obliterated by the Roman Catholics. Now the American Indians were hit by the same thing as happened to the Norse pagans, when their ancient and timeless world was sent to oblivion.